I always hated the relationships between certain teachers and the students within schools. Being so carefree at the age of 13 made me not realise how mean and condescending some teachers could be. Also, it didn't help that I was your typical average kid. Everything I did was that'll do. I tried so hard to change my ways, but eventually, after working so hard and seeing no results, I decided to quit it and just try to be content with where I was. My classmates generally got along well with each other, including me. I had some very loyal and great friends, who were all, unfortunately, smarter than me. It was a recurring joke that while they would all try to one-up each other, I was just trying to cover up the fact my test scores were nowhere near as good as theirs. It didn't really affect me though, because I always tried to be happy and confident in myself, and I knew they would never do it in a harmful or malicious way. My classmates soon joined us in this joke, and we became even more close, and this recurring joke eventually spread outside our class. Everyone started to get along, except for this one guy. For the sake of the story, I'll just refer to him as Nick, not wanting to give away any personal details. He was always on his own, and never really spoke in class. I couldn't understand why, as we'd always tried to involve him in our discussions. He didn't really seem like a bad guy, despite the fact we never spoken to. However, whilst we as pupils were always polite to him, the teachers weren't. The majority of teachers would pick on him, even though it was only once in a while. The way they conducted themselves when doing it was in such a domineering and disrespectful manner, and we all unanimously felt sorry for Nick. Other times, teachers would just leave him, and on the rare occasion when Nick would put up his hand, they would just ignore him and leave him to fend for himself. However, there was always this one teacher who would completely dehumanize Nick and treat him as a vermin compared to us, who he treated as normal humans. If anything, he treated us so much more better than any other teacher, maybe to further emphasize how much he hated Nick. He would pick on him for almost every question which was deemed difficult for us, and when he would inevitably get it wrong, which we gave him no shame for, the teacher would belittle him, until we could all see visible tears of anger and pain plastered on Nick's face. I knew that at some point his anger would boil over, as anyone in that scenario would feel the same, but I didn't realise how drastic the situation could become. Every time we had that teacher, things seemed to get worse every week. Eventually, some of the teacher's arrogance and hatred rubbed off onto the popular students, who started to disassociate themselves from the rest of our class, purely to bully Nick. One of these people was unfortunately my best friend. He was still exactly the same, still intelligent, and he hung out with me all the time. However, when he saw Nick, he felt an urge to berate him. I tried to tell him a few times, just to stop this and regress from his ways, but he never listened. I knew this would come back to haunt him, as things like this always do, but I didn't realise it would be like this now. It was our normal lesson with that same teacher, who had grown to love teaching our class, due to the newfound popularity he had gained from hating Nick for no clear reason. I was sitting, pretty bored in my class, as my professor droned on, actually teaching for once, as he couldn't occupy his time by hating Nick, who wasn't in that day. I try not to assume the worst, but most of my thoughts involved some sort of death. Suddenly, I sat upright in my chair, after hearing the faint sound of some sort of rifle, and screams, which echoed through the corridors. The head then made an announcement, to say the school was to go into lockdown, but this was not a drill, and we had to try and stay calm. I saw the frightened expression on my teacher's face, and I could tell he put two and two together, which equaled his life was in danger. I saw the same expression on the classmates, who had suddenly changed their tune, and I knew they felt the same. They were all grouped in one corner, as far away from the door as possible, and trying to use other people to shield them. Everything fell silent momentarily, until we heard a loud knock on the door. It sounded desperate, as if it was a student who was desperately trying to get in for safety. However, when I looked up, I saw the pain-stricken face of Nick. He had so much anger on it. His teeth were clenched together, and we finally caught a glimpse of the weapon he was using. There was blood on his face, which explained the scream we'd heard earlier. Some poor soul had their life taken away. He was finally able to bust down the door, even though it took some strength, and he wasn't the biggest person. He surveyed the room briefly, located our teacher, and pushed a gun to his head. With one swift pull of the trigger, he shot him. His lifeless body dropped to the ground, but Nick seemed unfazed. He turned towards the corner of bullies and unloaded an entire round onto them. Way more than was needed to kill them, but he knew this. He just wanted to prove his point. The last thing I saw was the dead body of my best friend, with a scared look on his face, almost as if he was longing for me to help him. But what could I do? Nick surveyed the room again and stared at me directly in the eyes. He smirked, shot a few bullets into the ceiling, and made his way quickly. I guess he must have heard the sirens, or the voices he claimed to be hearing had changed their mind. He was arrested on the field outside the school and is still being tried to this day, and it is looking likely he will get the death penalty. I've never forgotten that day, and I know that me and all my classmates won't either. I just hope that justice is served, and my story can help raise awareness for a situation which is all too real.